Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Freely Nourished, the podcast that empowers you to break the cycle of dieting by teaching you to nourish your body well. I am your host, registered dietitian Erin Casey, and I am also the owner of New You Nutrition Counseling, where we believe that you can reach all of your healthcare goals at just about any body size. So if you are ready to let go of that toxic and shameful cycle of dieting and feeling bad about your body and about yourself, and ready to step into a world where you are free to eat your favorite foods, experience joy with them, and still reach your health core goals, then join us. We will put a link in the notes in terms of where you can reach us and how you can work with us. And we hope to see you very soon. Today, I wanted to talk just a little bit about, honestly, something that comes up for, I would say, at least 50 to 60% of my patients, and that is getting meals done and getting them done quickly. So quick and easy meals, not so much just recipe ideas, because I feel like that's something that we can talk through kind of one-on-one, maybe have some workshops on and things like that, but more of just how to build a meal and pull it together and do it quickly. Because let's be honest, we are all busy folks. We live in a crazy hustle driven capitalist society that puts a lot of demands on our time. Many of us also have, friends, families, other hobbies, etc., outside of our jobs. So it can be really, really hectic, and it can be really hard to feel that ability to nourish yourself well in the midst of all the hustle and bustle. So I am here to help today with kind of a couple of tips that I tend to give that I feel like are generalized for most people. As with anything, these may or may not apply to you. But again, that's the benefit of having a dietitian and working with someone one-on-one, is that you can kind of air out, your concerns one-on-one, kind of talk to us about what your barriers are specifically, whether they are financial or time bound, or you're dealing with different appetites and things like that. Those are all things that, or even like dealing with food allergies and stuff of that nature. Those are all things that, like, working with a dietitian one-on-one can help you to strategize, to kind of give you that practical advice that's going to apply to your situation directly. So if that's something that, this piques your interest, but it doesn't quite meet the need that you have, I definitely encourage you to book a discovery call with us. Let us know what resonated with you and what maybe kind of missed the mark, and we can work with you one-on-one to, or at least tell you about the ways that we can work with you one-on-one to kind of help meet your needs specifically. As for kind of most people, obviously, I just recorded a podcast on how to calculate kind of your calorie needs and things like that. So of course, all of our nutrition needs are very different. All of our cultural needs are very different. All of our lifestyles, day to day schedules, other demands, things like that, all of that's very different. Generally speaking, though, I would say most people need to be eating about 3 meals per day to meet their calorie goals. How big those meals are, what all they consist of, that's going to vary person to person. We also, depending on your calorie needs, you may have to add in snacks just to kind of help get to that calorie goal, depending on where it is. You also may need to eat like smaller, more frequent meals if you have certain GI conditions, things of that nature. But generally speaking, most of us need about 3 meals. And I always tell people, try to make sure that each of those meals has a solid serving of protein. That does not have to be meat. It can be things like, vegetarian options or like meat alternatives. It can also be things like beans and legumes. It can be nuts and nut butters. It can be eggs if you do eggs, even things like cheese, etc. If you are just vegetarian and not vegan, all of that can constitute as a protein. And take up that portion on your plate. The other thing I recommend is that you have some type of grain or starch. So when I say grain, I mean things like bread, rice, pasta, things that are made with like, wheat grain, rice grain, oats, things like that, or a starch. So that could be, something like a potatoes, corn. Again, the beans and legumes can also fit in there, those kinds of things. And then I recommend having either a fruit or a vegetable. It does not matter which. Okay. If you have diabetes and have to be, or, have blood sugar issues and you have to monitor your carbohydrate intake, that fruit may alter your other choices. But again, that's something that you want to talk about one-on-one with a dietitian, because that is going to, what that looks like for you is going to be very specific to you. It's not going to be specific. Somebody else with the same condition may have a totally different recommendation. But if you don't have any blood sugar issues, then it doesn't matter which. The reason why it matters for blood sugar is that fruit does have sugar in it, and it has more carbohydrates in it to raise that blood sugar than vegetables do. Now, for the majority of the population who has no issue managing their own blood sugar, that makes little to no difference in your diet. If you do have issues managing your blood sugar, obviously it does. So we have a protein, we have a starch or a grain, and then we have either a fruit or a vegetable. And we're going to do that at least 3 times a day. If we need snacks and things like that, we can, kind of talk about that. I did a whole podcast episode actually on how to kind of build healthful snacks. So those are kind of 3 main components. They do not have to necessarily be separate components. Okay. So if we think about something like pizza, for example, we have our grain in the crust. We have that nice, lovely dough. And it can be a cauliflower crust or whatever, but like, it's still going to be like starchy enough to be considered a grain. And then we have, maybe some meat and cheese and things like that on top of it. And you may even have veggies on top of it too. So you may have all 3 of your food groups in that one pizza. If you don't have a substantial amount of veggies on the pizza, or like there's no veggies on the pizza at all, well, then you have the pizza and then maybe you have a side salad, maybe you have broccoli or something like that alongside, so that it's, a more complete, so to speak, meal, but you still are getting kind of 2 of those groups in one, for example. So they don't necessarily have to be separate, right? Now, even like mac and cheese can arguably be a protein because of the amount of cheese and milk in it, as well as that grainy part. And then you would just need like a vegetable or something along the side. So there's definitely wiggle room. Okay. But we want a protein source. We want a carbohydrate source, or like a grain or a starch source. And then we want either a fruit or a vegetable. Now, when we think about kind of our 3 standard meals, so kind of breakfast, lunch, dinner, I would say more often than not, people tend to struggle with protein when it comes to breakfast, and they kind of just in general struggle with lunch. And then dinner kind of tends to be the most balanced, but people do also kind of stress out about doing things like eating takeout or convenience foods and things like that. So I want to kind of talk through those things. With breakfast, don't tie yourself to like eggs and bacon and sausage as the only protein sources for breakfast. Those are great sources of protein. If you want to eat those things or have time to make them for yourself, that's great. If you do not, we can do a lot of other things. So you can do things like, resort to like protein shakes or something like that as a protein source for your breakfast, especially if you are somebody who is not particularly hungry in the morning, or you are rushing out the door. Getting a liquid form of protein in the form of a shake, or even a convenient form of like a bar, like a Quest bar or something like that. Those can be really great options to just kind of grab, get out the door quickly, and shove it in your mouth, right? You can also do a little bit more preparation around things like egg cups, like, you kind of like mix up, eggs and veggies and cheese or whatever you want into little like muffin tins, and then you bake them. Those do really well in the fridge, but they also do really well in the freezer. You can pre-make like, breakfast sandwiches or burritos and like pre-freeze those as well. But you can also, it doesn't have to be elaborate. It can be as simple as, grabbing a protein shake or a protein bar. You would want to make sure you've got a fruit and a starch with that. But those can be kind of quick things, right? So like a protein shake, a piece of toast, and a banana are like, that's a perfectly balanced breakfast. And then you're out the door. It could also be like, if you don't have whole fruit available or aren't able to eat fruit on the go, it can be fruit juice, right? Like you can blend protein powder, frozen fruit. You can even add frozen spinach, and oats and things like that into a smoothie. And it's all in one cup, right? You can add things like collagen peptides, which have very little flavor. You can add them to things like oatmeal if you wanted to do that. You can add them to your coffee, but I will say that coffee with collagen peptides alone is not a meal. Okay. It is okay to be part of a meal, right? If that's the protein portion of your breakfast, and then you have, I don't know, cereal and orange juice or something like that, that's fine. But the coffee and the collagen is not in and of itself a meal. For lunch, I feel like a lot of times, some people, if they're able to cook at home, they may pack leftovers. A lot of people eat out for lunch, and that's okay. That's totally fine. Just follow those basic principles, right? Like if you go to Jimmy John's and get a sandwich, well, you've got the bread, which is going to be your grain. You've got some kind of protein probably on that sandwich, and you may add vegetables to that sandwich. Like kind of the nice thing about those types of places is that they give you the ability to add those veggies on top. So that's fine. If you're not able to add a ton of veggies on top, you could also you could pack a salad from home. You could pack carrot sticks or celery, anything like that to kind of just increase those veggies. You could pack a fruit if packing a fruit is easier, and you have an apple that you didn't buy at Jimmy John's, but you brought with you, then that's a perfectly good option. Those things tend to be more shelf stable. They don't need as much refrigeration and things like that. So that could be a perfectly good option. You could also be as simple as making your own sandwich. Like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich with an apple is a meal. It doesn't have to be complicated, and it doesn't have to be riddled with this superiority of it's homemade or it's a salad or what. If you want a salad or have a salad, great, but it doesn't have to be a salad. You can have a wrap with chicken and a clementine, and that is your meal, right? You just want to make sure that it's got those 3 groups and it's going to fill you up. And again, of course, snacks, full permission to snack. But these are just kind of, again, this talk is centered around the meals. For dinner, I feel like, this is kind of the meal that we tend to kind of cook the most. But that cooking can be stressful because it can be time consuming, and a lot of us have other evening activities and engagements and things like that. So do not be afraid to use what I'm going to call quote unquote processed foods. I want to be very clear that processed foods do not have a formal definition. They have been demonized by influencers in the media with little to no substantiated evidence. There is no formal definition of processed food. Therefore, there is no research surrounding processed foods. So any claims that you were hearing about processed foods or junk or whatever is fabricated. Frankly, there is no research on processed foods because there is no definition of processed foods. Okay. So I want you to let that sink in for a minute. Processed foods are not inherently bad. Okay. It is a fear-mongering tactic of health foods to promote their product as in some way superior, even though the actual processing that goes into it may be very similar. So processing a food, for example, baby carrots are a processed food, right? That means that you have taken a whole carrot and you have run it through a machine that whittled it down into a baby carrot. That's how baby carrots are made. They don't grow out of the ground in little baby carrot format. They take big carrots and process it to make it a smaller carrot that's fun sized for kids, right? That's cheese is a processed food, right? We take milk, we add rennet, we let it sit for a couple of days and do some magical things with salt and flavorings and whatever, and boom, then we have cheese. That's a process of food, right? It's a food that is processed. So I just want to be clear that processed foods do not have there's no inherent definition. There's a lot of fear mongering around ingredients. Again, that is really not substantiated in the literature. So unless you have specific allergies or specific intolerances, and you're working with your doctor and a dietitian to discuss those specific things, there is really no reason for you to avoid pretty much any food that you can buy at the supermarket. They're safe, they're healthy, and they are convenient. They will make your life easier. So use them. One of the things I always tell people is that frozen vegetables actually have more nutrition in them than fresh vegetables. So I'm going to say that again for those of you who maybe weren't listening. Frozen vegetables are actually more nutritious than fresh. They have not been processed as much. They have not traveled as far. They maintain their nutrient value because of the way they are processed. So using those like steamer bags of like frozen broccoli and things of that nature as a quick and easy way to get a vegetable on the table, win all around, right? Another thing that you can do is either get those mixed kind of salad kit bags, or even just like a big brick of, spring mix or spinach or whatever you like, and kind of a couple of salad toppings, to where you can kind of always pull together a big salad as kind of part of the dinner table. That can be a really easy thing too. So those are kind of, two really quick and easy go-to options that require absolutely no cooking other than the microwave part. To get your veggie portion of that in. When it comes to grains and starches, same thing, right? Like there's boil and bag rice. There's a little rice things that you just like peel the thing back and like stick it in the microwave for, I think it's 90 seconds or something like that. Or the little cup, same concept. Those are quick and easy meal ideas. You can also do a lot with ramen, to where you're not even like cooking full on like the rice or pasta noodles or things like that. Rice noodles also cook very quickly. So you can create a lot with those things, but you're spending less effort cooking the starch down and more effort on maybe the protein or a sauce or something like that. Same goes for sauces. There's a lot you can do with sauces and condiments that, like, yeah, you could make it from scratch if you wanted to or had the time, but the teriyaki sauce on the shelf is perfectly fine for your stir fry. There's no reason not to use that. And if it makes your life easier and it makes the flavoring more fun and exciting and enjoyable for your family, then there's really no reason not to use it. And then, proteins, especially if your protein is meat, it can take a while to cook down. Sometimes like that's the labor intensive part. You can sometimes cook up things in bulk. And I'm not necessarily talking about meal prepping per se, but things like, baking a whole big package of chicken and then using, some of it for a pasta dish, some of it for a stir fry. The other part gets shredded up and goes into tacos. You cook the chicken one time, so then like the rest of it kind of just pulls together very easily throughout the week. But sometimes like that's then, if the other parts are more convenient, right? So if the vegetables are convenient, the starches are convenient, then the protein can kind of be the thing that you focus on the most. I also want to pause here and kind of just note that if you eat out a lot, for lunch or for dinner, and that's just because that's the fastest and easiest way for you to feed yourself or your family, that is okay. You can still add things to what you're eating to balance it out that you don't necessarily have to get from the restaurant that you are ordering from. So you can drive through, get your sandwich and your fries, and then have, again, pop in a bag of broccoli into the microwave, make yourself a quick salad. Even if it's like at a different time than the meal, that's still fine. It still counts as nutrition that got in your body. So those are things that you can do as well. If you have the ability to, or, if you're ordering takeout from like a sit down restaurant and they have the ability to order like a side salad on top of your meal, like you order the meal that you want and you just add a side salad on, or you DoorDash the majority of your meal, but then you create a salad at home, you create broccoli at home. Those types of things are, or you order a really big salad and like you make yourself some frozen garlic bread to like go along with it so that you get that starch component. Or you order something that's like maybe a veggie stir fry and then like you pop in some frozen chicken nuggets into your air fryer to add to your stir fry sauce to add some protein. Those are things that you can do to kind of hybrid the eating out, but also kind of just add to it and kind of fluff it up a little bit, if that makes sense. So those are just a couple of quick and dirty tips. Again, those may not apply to you and your situation, and if so, that's totally okay. But if you would like some guidance into your personal situation, click the link below. I will gladly have a conversation with you. When it comes to things like, quick recommendations and stuff like that, that may be something we can cover in a discovery call. It may be something that we cover in 1 or 2 sessions, one-on-one, but it doesn't have to be a long, drawn out process. It doesn't have to be kind of like this built out perfect meal plan. It's just trying different strategies and seeing what works for you. So I hope that was helpful for you all. And I will see you all next week.